Today we're going to learn how to make a really great stovetop chicken and andouille jambalaya. Now, I used to make this jambalaya in a big kettle at my family's cookouts. I was the one in charge of the jambalaya. But I wanted to make a version that you can make at home on your stovetop, and this is a really great version of what I used to make, so I hope you enjoy it. Now here's a list of ingredients you're going to need for today. You'll see I'm using andouille sausage. I make that myself, but you can get some really great andouille sausages at your supermarket. These are basic ingredients for a jambalaya that's a Creole style versus Cajun. Cajun is a little bit more brown jambalaya. This is a Creole, which has tomatoes, which makes it inherently Creole. Speaking of Creole, I make my own Creole spice blends. Real popular Creole seasoning in the South is Tony Shakers, or Tony Chachere's, people call it. But I like my own seasoning blends, and I'll tell you why. The commercial blends that you get in the store have a lot of anti-caking agent and preservatives to help keep them on shelf and to keep them from caking. You'll see Chachere's on the left is a lot lighter because of the salt and the anti-caking agent, whereas my blends here you'll see on the right are more about the spices and the flavors, and they're really good traditional Creole blends. And here I'm going to give you the recipes for each of those. This is my Creole seasoning. You can use this on crab. I sprinkle it on my crawfish after it comes out of the boil. Anywhere Creole seasoning is used, this is a really great recipe for a Creole seasoning blend. Now, another thing that's common in the Gulf states is gumbo filet. Instead of gumbo filet, which is just ground sassafras, I like to make my own filet blend, seasoning blend. This is really great in gumbos. It's really great in this recipe and anywhere that you would use filet powder. It's really a lot more flavorful than just ground sassafras. Okay, we're going to start off by dicing our celery. We want kind of a small dice on this. We don't want big, huge chunks. You'll see I'm putting aside the tops and the bottoms. I use the tops and the bottoms for broths and stuff. I don't like to waste anything. And to make the dice we want, we kind of cut it into 3 parts here, and then just, you'll see the size I'm trying to get here. And you may need to cut them 2 or 3 times depending on the width of your celery. Again, the reason we're doing this is we don't want huge pieces of celery. We don't want the celery to be, you know, too chunky. So you'll see just nice standard dice on that. You see I'm using the hearts. I've rinsed these. I just use the hearts of the celery, and I use 2 of those, and just go ahead and chop that up. Next thing we're going to do is an onion. Kind of a medium-sized yellow onion. Doesn't have to be too big. And again, we're going to use a standard dice on this. Now you'll notice one thing when I cut my onion. I don't use the horizontal slice that a lot of cooks and chefs will use. For home cooks, that can be a very dangerous cut, and a lot of people cut themselves trying to put that horizontal slice in there, and it's really not really needed. I've been cooking for years, and all I ever use is the vertical slice. You see, just making a few lines about the size I want the dice. And then just coming back and cutting that. And you'll see it makes a pretty decent dice. I've been using it forever, and I've never had a chef tell me it was wrong or tell me to do something different. It's a really great dice. It doesn't have the horizontal cut, so it's a little bit less dangerous when you're working in the kitchen. Now we've got our onion chop. We're going to go ahead and do our bell peppers. You see I put a bowl over there. I like to save the seeds. And really I save anything from my compost bowl or the seeds from things so I can grow them later. And I'm only using about, well, just a little bit under a half of each. I want about 1.5 cups of bell peppers. So you'll see I'll cut a little piece off of each of them, and then I'll take and I'll put the seeds and everything in a bowl, and I'll dry those seeds out and put them in a little envelope, and I'll use them to grow the next bell pepper batch I do. And I want to tear the little white ribs out too. And then the chopping here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of chop the ends off, and I'm going to save those, put those off to the side. I use them, so I'll save them. Just kind of give them a cut. We just want another regular dice on this. We kind of want all the vegetables to be about the same size. And you can rough chop it here. You'll see I'm not really doing anything exact. I'm just rough chopping it. I don't want anything too uniform. I just wanted a decent dice on it. And we'll do that for all our peppers. I think the red, green, and the yellow pepper really make a great color combination in this dish. It really looks good. And now that we've got our vegetables prepped, we're going to work on our sausage here. As I told you, I smoke this sausage myself. I make it myself, and then I use a collagen casing because it's easy to get the casing off. I don't want the casing on the sausage for this dish. So I smoke my own sausage, as I'll show you here in this picture. And I make it to where the casing's easy to remove, so that when I do something like this, I can just remove the casing and get rid of that collagen and just have the meat. And what I'm using it for is to kind of flavor the oil, so I want a lot of surface contact between the oil and the meat to try to help, flavor the dish. I like to cut them into half moons. You can, of course, use whole rounds if you prefer, but I like half moons. And you'll see the casing just falls right off here. And I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to discard that casing. Next is just cutting them into slices. Like I said, half moons. That's about the size pieces you want. You're going to go ahead and do that for all your sausage. And you can put as much sausage as you want or as little. I like a lot of sausage and a lot of chicken. I think it really adds to the dish. The next thing you want to work on is our chicken thighs here. I use chicken thighs because there's a lot more flavor in them. I'm going to use my knife to kind of scrape off any fat. You can leave a little bit of fat on. When you saute it, that fat will render off and add some flavor to the dish, but we don't want a huge amount of fat in there, so I'll scrape off as much fat as I can. And then I want to just kind of cut it up into bite-sized pieces. Again, I'm using thighs because thighs have great flavor. They're a little bit more tolerant to heat, so they stay juicy. And so I'm just going to cut this up, and on the bottom there'll be like a little medallion, or they call it a nugget. I'll just kind of take and cut it into long strips, and then real long strips I'll cut down into bite-sized pieces. Then I'll flip it over and get that medallion off the bottom. Give that a nice chop in half. Once you got your chicken prepared, we're going to just take a tablespoon, I like a heaping tablespoon of the Creole seasoning. And you're going to sprinkle it all around on your chicken pieces. And the best way I've found to do this is just get your hands in there with a fork and kind of give it a toss. You want to toss it and make sure that seasoning gets on all the chicken. Make sure it's well coated. And then I want to cover that with plastic and set that off to the side. Now at this point you can put all the prepped ingredients in the fridge until you're ready to cook. But I just kind of do everything in order and just keep right on cooking. Alright, we're getting into our pan now. We got about 2 or 3 tablespoons of olive oil or canola oil. And we're going to add our sausage right to that. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of flip that, get all the sausage coated in the oil. And what we're trying to do here is extract some of the fat and the flavoring from the andouille sausage into the oil. This will help flavor the whole dish. And I'm using a spoon here to kind of make sure everything's flattened out, make sure we have great surface to pan contact. This will help some of the fat and the spices from the andouille render out into that oil. And I'm on like medium-high heat right now. And what we're doing here is we're building layers of flavor. We're going to start by extracting some of the spices and the fat from the sausage, and then we're going to add the chicken and do the same thing. We're kind of building layers of flavor for the jambalaya. Alright, we're kind of brown on one side. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to give it a little flip. You see I've set a bowl off to the side to put my sausage in when it's done, so I'm just going to give it a little flip. We don't want to totally cook or brown the sausage. We're just trying to render off a little fat and flavoring. Okay, once we've got a good color on that, it looks really good. You'll see I'll kind of tip my pan forward. And that's to let all the oil run down. We want to save that oil because we're going to be cooking that. So I'll use a slotted spoon to extract the sausage, getting as much of the oil as I can off of it back into the pan. And you'll see that oil's got a nice red color to it. I'm just going to set all that into a bowl. And to that we're going to add our chicken. And again, using a spoon, we're going to kind of break that up and make sure we get good surface to pan contact. I'm using about 3 or 4 chicken thighs. You can use as many as you like depending on the size of the thighs. And kind of like the same with the sausage here, we're just trying to extract the flavor of the chicken and that Creole seasoning into that oil to help season the dish. And after we've kind of cooked a little bit on one side, we're just going to give it a flip. You can do this with a spoon. You don't have to pan flip like this if you're not comfortable with pan flipping. Just use your slotted spoon or your spatula, whatever you have on hand to kind of give it a flip. Again, using the spoon to make sure we have good surface contact. Now after it's sauteed for a while, I'm going to give it a flip and kind of look at the color. I'm looking for the chicken to start to caramelize a little bit. You'll see the color when it does. You'll see a color change. And kind of like with the same thing with the sausage, I'm going to reserve the oil as much as I can by tilting it forward, and with the slotted spoon drawing the chicken to the back and trying to get as much oil off that chicken as I can. See, we got just about the same amount of oil as we had when we had the sausage in there, but that oil is really flavorful now. Again, you'll see that oil's nice and red. It's got great flavor and great color now. To this, we're going to add our Holy Trinity. And you see how we're just building on the flavors that we started with. Giving that a toss to make sure it's nice and coated with all the oil. What we're going to do is we're going to saute this until the onions start to turn translucent. That's where they're kind of a little clear. Now, jambalaya is kind of like a paella. It's going to be cooked in broth and rice. So all this stuff is going to be cooked further when we do the simmering. Again, I'm just flipping it here, making sure everything's coated. I'm looking at the vegetables, looking for those onions to turn translucent. And once they're translucent, right at the end there, I'm going to add my garlic. We don't add our garlic in the beginning because if garlic burns, it'll get bitter, and we don't want that. So here we have about 3 or 4 cloves of garlic, minced. You can use jarred garlic. I like fresh garlic the best. We're kind of mixing that garlic in there. Now we're not going to saute this like we normally would. We just kind of have to want it to cook while we're preparing the rest of the dish. So I'm just right over the top. I'm going to add my sausage and my chicken. And underneath, everything's cooking underneath that sausage and chicken right now. So it's getting that 90 seconds that you want that garlic to get. See, I'm scraping the sides. I don't want anything to stick to the side. Then I'm going to give it a mix. Kind of mix it in all the flavors. Now we're going to add our tomatoes with basil and oregano. I believe it's garlic, basil, and oregano. It's in those tomatoes. You can get them in the can. Red Gold sells a version. There's a lot of different versions of them. You can use anyone that has the basil, garlic, and oregano. We're just going to give that a stir. We're going to kind of bring that all up to temp. We want it to be nice and hot. You'll notice in the back there I have my broth in a pan. I like to get my broth nice and hot before I add it to the dish as well. So in that pan in the back there, that's my chicken broth. And I use homemade chicken broth. You can use a can if you do try to get a real good one. Alright, we're going to add a teaspoon of filet powder. Or filet spice blend, as I showed you in the beginning of the film here. And then 1 teaspoon of Frank's Red Hot. You can use Frank's Red Hot. This is Berman's, which is kind of the same thing as Frank's. I believe it's made by Frank's. Same thing Frank's Red Hot is. And then 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire. And just kind of give that all a mix. And also mixing it helps everything kind of heat evenly as well. We're trying to get everything nice and hot so it takes less time once we add our broth and our rice. Speaking of, that's all ready to go. And so here we go with 3 cups, and I measured out 3 cups exact because the water and the rice pretty much have to be exact so everything's not too soupy or doesn't cook too quick or dehydrate too quick. So you'll see 3 cups homemade chicken stock. And then a cup and a half of just regular white rice. We don't rinse the rice. We want the starch in the rice to kind of make a nice creaminess in the sauce. And we're going to give that a little mix. I'm going to up my heat just a little bit for a little while. I want to bring this up to a boil, and then I'm going to reduce it to a simmer. So kind of leave it on that heat, let it get nice and hot. Again, I want to bring it to a boil, then reduce to a simmer. You'll see it's starting to get hot here. It's starting to bubble. I'm going to add a lid to it. That'll help keep the heat and the steam in. Again, bring it to a boil, then reduce to a simmer. We're going to set a timer for 20 minutes. 20 minutes isn't the exact timing, but it helps me to decide when we're getting close. So I'm going to reduce my heat to simmer. You'll see it's boiling pretty good in there. And I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. As I said, the jambalaya really tells you when it's done, but 20 minutes gives you kind of an estimate, so that about halfway through, now you don't have to do this, about 10 minutes through the cooking process, I like to stir it to help encourage it to cook evenly. Some people don't. They like a little crusty bottom, and that's kind of traditional, is to have that crusty part in the bottom. But on the stovetop, it's really hard to achieve that, so after 10 minutes, I just give it a nice mix, put the cover back on, and then wait another 10 minutes or so before I check it. So after another 10 minutes, you'll see it's pretty close. Now, it looks a little bit wet right now, but as it stands, it will thicken even more, and it's nice and creamy, and it's just a great quality product right now. It's seasoned well, and you'll see it's nice and thick. So we're going to go ahead and plate it. You don't want your jambalaya to be soupy. You don't want too much sauce in your jambalaya. You'll see it's nice and rich and starchy. Plates real well. So get a couple spoonfuls in there, and I like to try to top it off with a little extra sausage and chicken just for appearance. So I'll kind of reach in here and grab myself a little extra sausage and chicken for the top. Then I'll garnish it with a little bit of green onions. And now you're ready to serve. And there you have it, folks. A quick, easy stovetop jambalaya. It's really great and tasty. I hope you like it. I know my family does. Thank you for visiting. We got more recipes coming up, so check back soon. And thank you and have a nice day.